By the time Aurora Ironhold dropped the breakfast tray, her hands were shaking so hard the silver cups rang like little bells across the stone floor. Silence hit the servants' corridor first, sharp, stunned, dangerous. Then Lady Aurora Windrider's voice cut through it like a whip. "Look at what you've done!" Aurora fell to her knees before the spilled cream could reach the hem of the noblewoman's blue silk. "Forgive me, my lady. I slipped." "You breathed wrong," Windrider said. The other servants did what they always did, lowered their eyes, stepped back, and made themselves smaller, because pity was expensive and useless in House Windrider. Aurora could feel them retreat from her like heat leaving a room. Lady Windrider stood over her, beautiful in the cruel, polished way of blades. Her hair was braided with silver wire, her nails lacquered moon-white, and on one finger she wore the signet ring that opened the accounting room where no servant was permitted to look. Aurora had spent 16 years learning not to stare at things she was forbidden to want. Food, sleep, a soft voice, a life. Still, she stared at that ring now, because last night she had seen the ledgers it unlocked, and her stomach had not stopped turning since. "Hold out your hands," Windrider said. Aurora's breath caught. "My lady, please, I can clean it." Hands. The head steward, Bran, stepped behind Aurora before she could think to run. His grip closed around the back of her neck, thumb digging into an old bruise. "Don't shame yourself further," he muttered, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. Aurora held out her hands. Windrider took the serving rod from the table, a narrow iron length used to hook roasting meat from the kitchen fire. She set it into the brazier at her side, turning it once until the tip glowed dull red. Aurora's body knew what was coming before her mind did. She tried to pull back. Bran tightened his grip. "My lady, please," she whispered, then louder when the iron lifted. "Please, I didn't mean—" "Intent has never improved the stain," Windrider said coldly. The hot metal kissed the center of Aurora's left palm. Pain hit white and total. A scream tore out of her throat before she could swallow it. The corridor blurred. She smelled scorched skin, cream souring on hot stone, and the bitter lavender perfume Windrider always wore when she wanted to remind people mercy was a costume. Windrider branded the right hand next. Aurora went limp against Bran's hold, sobbing now, breath tearing in and out of her chest. Her palms throbbed with each heartbeat. She folded over them instinctively, but Windrider nudged her shoulder with the rod until she looked up. "That," the noblewoman said, voice soft enough to make every servant listen harder, "is what happens when something marked as property forgets the value of steadiness." Property. The word should not have hurt more than the iron. It did. Aurora wore no legal slave brand on her throat like the older bondsfolk, only a servant collar of blackened steel, locked there when she was 8, for discipline and security. But everyone in House Windrider knew collars and chains were cousins. They only differed in how loudly they announced themselves. Windrider crouched, silk whispering over stone. "You've been distracted lately. Looking where you shouldn't. Lingering by doors. If I discover you have forgotten your station in more interesting ways, these burns will seem a kindness." Aurora's pulse pounded in her ears. Last night she had indeed lingered by a door, the accounting room, left ajar after the household feast. She had gone in only because the steward had sent her for a dropped key. She had seen columns of payments, names, supply routes, and one line written in a cipher she somehow recognized, despite never being taught it. To the border raiders. "Delay Silvermane shipments. Keep the Western cubs hungry." She had read it twice, stunned, while beneath the ledger a hidden drawer sat slightly open. Inside had been a crescent-shaped medallion of dark iron inlaid with moonstone, cold as winter. She had touched it and felt a strange shiver race up her arm, as if the metal had known her. Then footsteps had sounded, and she had hidden the medallion in her apron before fleeing. Now Lady Windrider's pale gaze rested on her too long. "Search her room," Windrider told Bran without looking away. "Everything." Aurora forgot to breathe. Bran hesitated. "My lady, over a spilled tray." "Over my instinct," Windrider snapped, "and I trust my instincts more than I trust servants." The other servants shrank farther. Someone quietly began mopping the cream around Aurora's knees. No one reached for her. No one ever did. "Yes, my lady," Bran said at last. Windrider rose. "Put her in the lower laundry until I decide whether she keeps those hands." She turned and left, her skirts missing the spill by an inch. Bran hauled Aurora up by the elbow. "Walk," he muttered. Aurora stumbled, palms held away from her body, agony making her teeth chatter. She knew what would happen when they searched her room. The ledger pages she had torn out and hidden beneath the straw mattress. The medallion wrapped in a rag. The proof that a noble house was starving border packs for profit and politics. Proof no one would let a servant keep alive. As Bran dragged her toward the cellar stairs, Aurora looked once at the open corridor ahead, at the bright strip of morning beyond the side gate. Something in her, already scorched raw, began to split. In the lower laundry, damp heat clung to the walls and turned pain sticky. Bran shoved her onto an upturned crate and slammed the door. "Stay still," he said. "Don't make this uglier." Aurora laughed once, a cracked, breathless sound that surprised them both. "Uglier?" His jaw tightened. For a moment he looked old and tired instead of hard. "If she finds what she thinks she'll find, you'll vanish. Do you understand me?" He knew, or guessed enough. Aurora pressed her burned hands against her apron just to feel a different pain. "Then why lock me in?" "Because I cannot fight her." His voice dropped. "And because if I leave the bolt loose, I can tell myself I am a coward and not a traitor." He walked out before she could answer. The bolt scraped into place. Aurora sat very still in the steaming dim, every breath salted by linen soap and old mildew, and listened to the house move overhead. Footsteps, doors opening, raised voices somewhere distant. The search had begun. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might tear her open. She had spent years surviving by bending, head down, voice low, wants buried so deep they stopped sounding like wants at all. But the ledgers had changed something. So had the medallion's impossible chill against her skin. So had Windrider's casual promise to take her hands, as if Aurora were a broom with splinters. If they found the stolen pages, they would beat a confession out of her. If they found the medallion, Windrider would ask why it had been hidden in a servant's room, and why Aurora had paled at the sight of it as if recognizing a face. A face? No, an old story. When Aurora had been very small, before the collar, one of the kitchen women had once whispered over her fever, half-moon birthmark, iron eyes. "Child, you were born to the wrong room." The woman had disappeared 2 days later. Aurora had taught herself not to remember. Above her, a floorboard thudded. Then another. Closer to the servant's wing. She moved. The bolt was old, Bran had said, and he had not fully dropped it. Aurora crossed the room, every jolt of her burned palms making black spots swim before her eyes, and wedged a laundry hook beneath the latch. Wood groaned. The iron scraped. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood and shoved with her shoulder. The bolt jumped free. She was through the door before the sound stopped echoing. The back corridors of House Windrider were a map her body knew better than prayer. She ran past steaming vats and hanging sheets, past the ash room and the narrow chapel no servant entered unless summoned to clean someone else's guilt. Bare feet slapped cold stone, her lungs seized on every breath. She kept one hand pressed against the inner pocket she'd sewn into her skirt, where the folded ledger pages crackled, and the crescent medallion struck lightly against her hip. At the turn before the dormitory hall, she heard shouting. "Her room's empty! Find her!" Windrider's voice rose over the rest, sharp with triumph rather than surprise. "To the kennels and the east gate. She won't risk the front, and if she crosses the outer fields, loose the hounds." Aurora's blood iced. The side passage, the coal chute, the drainage culvert under the herb wall. She saw the route all at once because she had cleaned every inch of it. She veered left, slammed through the kitchen scullery, and nearly collided with old Mara at the sink. The woman's eyes widened at the sight of her. "Child!" Aurora shook her head wildly. No time. No safe words. Mara looked once toward the hall, then shoved a wrapped heel of bread into Aurora's apron pocket and turned back to the sink as if nothing had happened. That tiny act of rebellion nearly undid her. Then the kennel horn sounded. Aurora sprinted to the coal room, kicked aside the bin beneath the chute, and dragged herself into the narrow dark. Sharp cinders bit her knees. Her burned palms slipped on soot-slick stone, and she nearly screamed. Behind her, doors banged open. "There! Check the scullery!" She flattened herself and slid feet first down the chute, skin scraping wood, breath trapped in her throat. She dropped the last 6 feet into a pile of slag outside the wall and rolled hard enough to wrench her shoulder. Cold dawn air hit like a slap. The herb wall loomed ahead, and beyond it the outer fields silvered with morning frost. Somewhere to the east, dogs barked madly. Aurora crawled through the drainage culvert, soaking her skirts in black water, then ran bent double through rows of dead fennel and winter rosemary until the estate wall finally vanished behind bramble and fog. She did not stop. She crossed 2 fields, then the birch copse, then the frozen creek that marked Windrider land from disputed border country. By noon, her breath was knives. By dusk, she could no longer feel her feet. Once she thought she heard riders and flung herself under a fallen log, clutching the medallion so hard its edge cut her palm. No riders came, only crows, and the wind moving through pine. The farther west she went, the rougher the land grew. Burn scars blackened whole stretches of hillside where the last war had bitten deep. Here and there she passed abandoned watchposts and split wagons half buried in snow. The world looked as tired as she felt. Night found her staggering up a rutted road toward a rise lit by torch fire. At first she thought she was hallucinating. The fortress was more skeleton than stronghold, its outer wall only half raised, scaffolds ribbing the stone like broken bones trying to knit. But smoke climbed steady from the central keep, and men and women moved along the ramparts with disciplined purpose, rebuilding, defending, living, Silvermane territory. She had heard the name in whispers all her life, Lucian Silvermane, the young Alpha King who had inherited ruin and answered it with teeth. Half the eastern houses feared him. House Windrider had smiled whenever his supply trains failed. Aurora made it 3 steps closer before a spear shaft slammed across her chest. "Down!" a guard barked. She dropped to her knees in the mud, too exhausted to catch herself. The world tilted. Torches flared above her, and bootsteps pounded from the gate. "Female," another voice said. "Lone. Border side. Could be bait. Or a thief." Aurora tried to speak and managed only, "Please." Hands seized her shoulders. Someone yanked her chin up. Through the blur, she saw tall walls, gray sky, and behind the guards, a man descending the unfinished gate stair with the kind of contained power that changed the air around him. Broad-shouldered, dark-coated, silver-eyed. He stopped dead before he reached her. Aurora felt it the same instant he did. A violent, impossible pull, as if something buried under skin and bone had just woken and turned toward home. The pull hit so hard Aurora forgot where she was. One heartbeat, she was in mud with a spear across her chest, freezing and filthy and shaking from pain. The next, the man on the stairs stopped like he'd taken a blade between the ribs, silver eyes locked on hers and every nerve in her body lit. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. His scent crashed over her in a wave, pine resin, cold iron, storm wind, and beneath it, something she knew in her marrow. Moonless stone, smoke, skin against skin in the dark of a ruined watch chapel while rain beat the roof, and a stranger with a rough voice had held her like she was breakable and holy at once. No, no, that had been one night, one impossible mistake she'd packed away, where hunger and hope went to die. The stranger could not be the Alpha King. The Alpha King could not smell like home. "Your Grace?" one of the gate guards said, uncertain. The man didn't answer. He descended the last steps slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal that might bolt or bite. "Unhand her," he said, voice low and edged. The guard's fingers left Aurora's shoulder at once. She swayed anyway. The world had narrowed to torchlight, breath, and those eyes, silver-rimmed now with a hot metallic gold that flashed and vanished too fast to trust. Someone behind him muttered, "Mate sent." Another hissed, "At the gate? Impossible." Aurora tried to push herself up and failed. Her burned palms slapped mud. Pain went white up both arms. The Alpha moved before she could choke back the cry. He caught her wrist, bare skin to bare skin where her torn sleeve had fallen, and the fortress disappeared. Heat lashed up her arm like lightning finding metal. Her pulse stuttered, then slammed into a new rhythm that wasn't hers alone. She felt his heartbeat answer, hard and wild, in perfect time. The air around them sharpened with scent so intense it made the guard step back. Storm ozone and pine sap split by something sweet and feral that made her belly clench. A wolf surged under her skin, not shifted, not seen, but awake. Awake in a way it had never been. It reached for him with starving certainty. His knees bent as if the force struck him too. For one raw second, Lucian Silvermane, the sleepless war alpha rebuilt from rumor and blood, dropped his head toward her throat in instinctive reverence, breath hot at the base of her neck, a sound torn from his chest, half growl, half prayer. "Mine," he rasped. The word hit her like another brand. Want flared low and fierce and terrifying. So did panic. Alphas did not say mine to girls with servant collars and whip scars and false names. People who wanted things got punished. She yanked her wrist free on reflex. The severed contact made both of them flinch. His jaw clenched so hard muscle jumped along his cheek. He stepped back a full pace, then another, as if distance cost him. "Inside," he said to his guards without looking away from her. "Now. No chains." A lieutenant frowned. "Sire, she came from Windrider Roads. Could be planted." Lucian's eyes flashed again, wolf bright this time. "Did I stutter?" "No, sire." They escorted her through the half-built gatehouse into a keep that smelled of mortar dust, hot metal, and too many tired people pretending they weren't tired. Workers paused with armfuls of timber to stare. Sentinels on the inner wall followed her with narrowed eyes. She heard the whisper ripple ahead of her, like wind through dry grass. Mate. Pretender. Trap. When they reached the great hall, she stumbled on an uneven stone seam. Lucian was there before she hit the floor. His hand closed around her forearm, steadying her. Another pulse of heat shot between them, less explosive than before but deeper, sinking into bone. He released her instantly. "Call Healer Tamsin," he snapped. "She's burned." Aurora stood in the center of the unfinished hall with soot on her face and blood stiff on her skirt, while the king of this territory paced a hard line 10 feet away from her, fists opening and closing like he was wrestling his own hands. He did not come closer again. That should have relieved her. Instead, it hurt in ways she had no right to name. Healer Tamsin arrived with a satchel of herbs and a mouth pinched thin with disapproval. She was old, sharp-eyed, and wore bone charms that clicked when she moved. She glanced once at Aurora's collar, then at Lucian. "This is the Windrider runaway?" Lucian's answer was granite. "This is under my roof. Speak accordingly." Tamsin grunted and set to work, cleaning Aurora's palms despite Aurora's wince and instinct to pull away. "Hold still, girl, unless you prefer rot." "I prefer not being called girl," Aurora muttered through her teeth. Tamsin snorted, almost amused, then pressed fingers to Aurora's wrist, throat, lower abdomen in quick clinical checks. Her expression shifted, subtle, then stark. She looked up at Lucian slowly. "How long since the moonless rains?" the healer asked Aurora. Aurora's mouth went dry. She did not answer. Tamsin didn't need it. She lifted her chin and said to the hall, clear enough for every listening guard, "She's with child." The words struck like a hammer. Silence. Then half a dozen breaths sucked in at once. Lucian stopped moving. Every line of him went still, dangerous still. "Say that again." "Pregnant," Tamsin repeated, early but certain. Aurora stared at the healer's hands as if they belonged to someone else, with child. Her mind bucked, trying to reject the memory. Rain-black stone, a stranger's hand spread over her belly as if memorizing her, his whisper in the dark. "If dawn finds us alive, run west." No. Impossible. Tamsin wasn't finished. She drew a warding glyph in the air over Aurora's abdomen, watching for response. The charm bead on her wrist snapped. Her face drained. "Broken blood," she whispered. Then louder, with ritual weight. "The fetus carries a split-line omen, cursed by broken blood." Chaos erupted. One guard spat against the floor for luck. Another made a claw sign against evil. Someone near the back swore, "Moon, spare us." Aurora felt as if the stone had dropped away under her. Cursed. Of course. The world had always found new names for people like her. Lucian crossed the distance in 3 strides and stopped himself so abruptly his boots scraped rock. His gaze cut to Tamsin. "You're sure?" "I am old, not blind." His throat worked. He looked at Aurora then, truly looked, at her burned hands, her collar, her shaking shoulders, and a terror she'd never seen in any man tore across his face. Not disgust, fear. Fear for her. He stepped back again, farther this time. "Secure the East Guest Tower," he ordered hoarsely. "Double guard. No one enters without my leave." Aurora laughed once, brittle as winter twigs. "A cage with better stones is still a cage." His eyes snapped to hers, agonized. "It's protection." From what? She wanted to scream. Assassins? Curses? You? But the hall was full of ears, and servant habits died hard. She swallowed blood where she'd bitten her cheek and let the guards lead her away. Behind her, Lucian said, low enough she almost missed it. "No one touches her." The East Tower room had a window slit, a narrow bed, and a lock on the outside. At dusk there was a knock. Not a command, not the scrape of a bolt, just 2 measured raps. Aurora, sitting rigid on the bed with her knees tucked to her chest, said nothing. The door opened anyway. Lucian entered alone, carrying a basin of steaming water, clean cloth, salve, and a folded shirt too large to be hers. He set everything on the table and stayed near the door, as if reminding both of them he knew where boundaries lived. "I dismissed the attendants," he said. "They were rough." She gave a short, humorless smile. "You keep me under guard and now you're worried about rough?" His jaw flexed. "I'm worried about everything." That, at least, sounded true. He glanced at her bandaged palms. "May I?" No one had asked her permission to touch her since she was 8 years old. Suspicion surged first, then confusion, then, unwillingly, curiosity. She held out her hands. Lucian knelt. A king on one knee before a runaway servant should have looked ridiculous. It looked like a vow. He unwrapped the healer's hurried dressings, jaw tightening at the angry burns. In the warm water, he wet a cloth and began to clean her skin with infuriating care, wiping away soot, dried blood, and the ink smudges from the stolen ledger that still stained the webbing of her fingers. He worked slowly enough not to tear the blisters, pausing whenever she hissed. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." For guilt? His hands stilled for one beat. For restraint. She frowned. "What does that mean?" His gaze lifted to hers, wolf-bright and exhausted. "It means every instinct in me says claim, guard, bite, keep." He looked back to her hands and resumed, gentler than before. "And I would rather cut off my own hand than become one more male who took from you because he could." The words landed heavy in the small room. When he finished salving her burns, he reached toward her throat, then stopped. "The collar," he said, voice gone rough. "Will you let me remove it?" Aurora's breath snagged. The steel band had lived on her neck for so long she sometimes dreamed it had grown under her skin. "Keys are with Windrider," she said. Lucian's mouth hardened. "Then we break it." In the forge court below, sparks streamed like fireflies while night gathered over the unfinished wall. Two smiths stood back in wide-eyed silence as Lucian held the collar steady on an anvil and split it with one brutal strike of a hot chisel. The metal snapped. Aurora flinched at the sound, then touched her throat in disbelief, fingertips finding only skin. Lucian fed the broken band into the coals. It blackened, glowed, then collapsed inward. "No one in my territory touches you without consent," he said, each word deliberate. "No hand, no order, no title above that." She searched his face for mockery, for political calculation, for the turn where kindness became debt. Found none. Only bone-deep fatigue and a ferocity that seemed to frighten him as much as anyone else. "Even you?" she asked. "Especially me," he almost said. She could see it. What he said was, "Yes." That night she dreamed of kennels and hot iron and hands pinning her down while someone counted her breaths like coin. She woke with a gasp, clawing at blankets, heart trying to batter its way out. A voice outside her door, low and steady, cut through the panic. "Outer wall estimates, 200 cubits stone to close the west breach before thaw." Lucian. Reading. She lay frozen, listening. "Grain inventory reduced by caravan losses. If we ration now, no child goes hungry before spring." Pages turned. "North Watchtower foundations unstable. Must reinforce with ironwood, not ash." His rhythm never faltered. Not soothing words, not comfort meant to pry her open, just the mundane cadence of rebuilding plans spoken like a metronome against her fear. He stayed outside the door. Didn't ask to enter. Didn't ask if she slept. At some point, her breathing matched his. At some later point, she slept. By the third day, the fortress smelled of tension and rain. Word of the cursed pregnancy had outrun the mortar dust, and allied alphas arrived with cloaks, condolences, and sharpened smiles. Lucian convened council in the great hall, unfinished arches dripping from a storm that refused to break. Aurora was told to remain in the gallery above. She went anyway, down the stair, into the hall, chin high despite the murmurs that followed her like flies. 3 visiting alphas stood before Lucian's war table. Garrick Stonejaw of the Eastern Mines, lean-faced Nessa Thornclaw of the Marsh Packs, and old Bram Halifin with wolfsbane beads braided into his beard. None bothered to hide their disdain when they saw her. Stonejaw spoke first. Send the girl away. Nessa's lip curled. Curse Carrier has no place in a rebuilding den. Bram tapped the table with a blunt nail. You keep her. Your young starve when moonluck turns. We cannot tie our caravans to a cursed womb. Aurora went cold, then hotter, rage threading through shame. Lucian stood very still at the head of the table. 9 maps lay spread before him, weighted by dagger hilts. He looked at each ally in turn, expression unreadable. Then he glanced at Aurora. Something in him snapped, his shift slammed halfway through in an instant, claws punching from fingertips, canines lengthening, eyes silver flooding to molten bright. A growl rolled out of him so deep the rafters seemed to answer. Careful, he said, voice edged with wolf. You are standing in my hall, fed by my stores, sheltered by my walls. You will not call my mate a curse and leave with all your limbs. Stonejaw bared teeth. Mate? She's a runaway servant with stolen papers. A runaway servant, Lucian said softly, who crossed winter roads alone while your hunters hid from snow. Nessa took one step back despite herself. We speak for our packs. And I speak for mine. He leaned over the table, claws sinking into oak. Any challenge to her safety is a challenge to my rule. Test that if you're lonely. Silence cracked across the chamber. Rain started at last, hard against the high slits. Bram broke eye contact first. Stonejaw swore under his breath. Nessa gathered her cloak and said, You choose badly, Silvermane. Lucian did not blink. Get out. They left with stiff bows that were not bows. Aurora realized only when the door slammed that she had been holding her breath. The hall began to stir again, captains murmuring, scribes pretending not to stare. She turned to go before anyone could see her hands shaking. At the base of the stair, a court guard she didn't recognize stepped into her path. Young, broad, eager to prove himself to whoever paid best. You heard the alpha, he said with a smug little grin. Back to your tower, curse girl. He reached for her arm. The world blurred. Lucian crossed 15 feet before the guard finished the motion. He caught the man's wrist mid-grab, twisted once, and the crack of breaking bones split the hall like a branch in frost. The guard screamed and dropped to his knees. Lucian held him there, face inches away, voice deadly calm. What did I say at the gate? The guard sobbed. No one touches... Lucian released him with a shove. Take him to infirmary, strip his rank. 2 sentries dragged the whimpering man away. Lucian turned to the assembled hall, blood from his own clawed palm beating onto the table where he'd gripped too hard. Write this, he said to the chief scribe. The scribe fumbled for ink. Fortress law, effective now. Any hand raised to my mate loses rank, teeth, or blood, depending on my mood. Quills scratched furiously. No one argued. Aurora stood motionless in the center of it all, heart pounding, old instinct screaming to make herself small, smaller, invisible. But invisibility had never saved her. And this man, terrifying and careful and exhausted to the marrow, had just redrawn law in front of half the territory because a guard touched her without consent. Lucian looked at her then, shift receding by degrees, pain and apology and unspent violence all warring in his face. Did he hurt you? He asked. Such a simple question. No one had ever asked it like it mattered. No, she said, voice unsteady. You were fast. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth and vanished. I'm trying to be. She should have stepped back. Should have reminded herself kings protected assets and mates were politics and curses killed anything they touched. Instead, before she could stop herself, she moved 1 pace closer. Not surrender, not forgiveness, but not retreat. Lucian noticed. His throat worked. He did not reach for her. For the first time since the gate, Aurora let herself believe that maybe Maybe wanting this would not end in iron. The warning horn blew before the echo of Lucian's decree had finished dying in the rafters. Once, twice, a third long call that meant rank at the gate. Every head in the hall turned. Rain hammered the slit windows harder as a runner skidded through the doors, drenched to the bone and panting. "Royal carriage at the outer rise," he gasped. "House Windrider banners. Lady Aurora Windrider requests immediate audience with the Alpha King." The room seemed to inhale all at once. Aurora's stomach dropped so fast she had to lock her knees. She tasted coal dust and old fear. Windrider had found her, not with hounds this time, with silk, title, and witnesses. Lucian's expression went from controlled fury to something colder. "How many?" 20 riders, 4 litters, court scribes with them. "Armed?" "Ceremonial steel only, sire, but they're not alone. 2 royal adjudicators." Murmurs broke out like cracks in ice. Adjudicators meant law. Law in these lands could cut cleaner than any blade. Lucian didn't look at the captains. He looked at Aurora. "You do not leave my sight." She hated how badly relief flared at that, and hated, too, that part of her heard cage in the words even now. The great doors opened before anyone could argue. Lady Aurora Windrider entered wrapped in dove-gray fur and morning blue, as if she were arriving at a funeral she had arranged. Rain beaded on her veil. Behind her trailed 2 attendants carrying lacquered boxes, a scribe with inkstone strapped to his chest, and a healer's apprentice Aurora recognized from Windrider's household. Windrider's gaze found her immediately. There was no surprise in it. "Poor thing," Windrider said softly, as though greeting a stray she had once fed scraps. "You do look tired." Lucian stepped between them in one smooth movement. "State your business and keep your pity." Windrider lowered her lashes, all gracious compliance. "Your Grace, I came with condolences. Word reached court of your difficult blessing. I thought it cruel to leave you unsupported in a moment of spiritual risk." She tipped her head toward the boxes. Silks for the mother, medicinals for the healer, a writ of merciful counsel from the tribunal. Merciful counsel. Aurora knew that tone. It was the one nobles used when they meant obedience at knife point. "Read it," Lucian said. The scribe stepped forward and unrolled vellum sealed in royal black wax. He read in a loud, clear voice, "By petition of House Windrider and advisement of sworn healer testimony, the bearer known as Aurora, surname unproven, currently carrying an omen-marked fetus, is to be remanded to tribunal custody for moonrite purification before quickening. Compliance expected by next full moon. Refusal constitutes defiance of Crown Health Law and may forfeit trade protections under Eastern Compact." Trade, protections, food, winter. The words struck the hall harder than any threat of swords. Windrider watched Lucian as the decree was read, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. "No one wishes violence, Your Grace. This is simply responsible governance. Your territory is fragile, your people hungry. Superstition can be expensive." Aurora's nails bit crescent moons into her palms. Lucian's voice came low and lethal. "Get out." Windrider smiled faintly. "You should hear me first." "I have heard enough." She took one delicate step closer, stopping exactly at the edge of his patience. "Have you slept, Lucian?" The hall went very still. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He said nothing. Windrider's voice dropped, intimate and poisonous. 9 days, if rumor serves. Not since your healer named the child cursed. You're making decisions while feral with exhaustion, defending a servant runaway against your own allies, and risking famine for a pregnancy that may not survive a moon turn. Her eyes flicked to Aurora with bright contempt. "I came to save what can still be saved." Aurora moved before she could think. "You came to finish what you started." Windrider turned that smile fully on her. "There you are. The little kitchen ghost with opinions. Lucian's growl rolled through the chamber. Windrider raised both hands as if soothing a beast. I ask only lawful process. Send her with adjudicators. Let right priests test the blood. If she is clean, she returns. If not, she let the sentence dangle like a noose. You keep your throne intact, and if court requires a stabilizing alliance to calm the pax, I am prepared to be practical. There it was, barely veiled, the bargain she had always wanted. Aurora suddenly remembered Windrider at 13, pinning her against the pantry wall and saying, "You will learn the difference between women born to command and women born to carry their shoes." Windrider dipped into a shallow curtsy. "Think on mercy, your grace." Then, to the room at large, "I will reside in your guest wing until dawn. We are, after all, kin in concern." As she turned to leave, her sleeve brushed Healer Tamsin's. A purse changed hands between cloth and bone charms so quickly most would have missed it. Aurora did not. Neither, she thought grimly, did Tamsin. By evening, the fortress felt infected. The first notices appeared on the mess hall door at sunset. Copied genealogies stamped with tribunal ink, naming Aurora Ironhold as unregistered bastard issue, no lawful blood right possible planted agitator. By supper there were 6 copies. By dark, someone had scratched Curse Bride in charcoal beside her tower stair. She stood before one notice with her jaw tight enough to ache, while voices murmured behind her. Could be true. Windrider brought papers. Since she came, we've lost 2 caravans. That part was true. Riders arrived mud-caked after dusk, with news that another grain train had been hit at the western cut. Survivors said raiders knew exact route, exact guard count, exact hour. Inside sabotage, the quartermaster called it. Outside, around cook fires, they called it curse luck. Lucian spent the evening in strategy council, then in the yard drilling sentries, then on the battlements staring into rain like he could will enemies to appear where teeth and claws could solve them. He still had not slept. Aurora saw it in the tremor he hid when he reached for a map weight, in the dark smudges beneath silver eyes, in the way his wolf rode too close to the surface whenever anyone said purification. When he passed her in the corridor, they both slowed. For one suspended breath she thought he might touch her cheek, or her hand, or simply close the distance and let instinct drown politics. His fingers flexed at his sides. He stepped back first. "Eat," he said roughly, "and keep 2 guards on your door." It should have sounded protective. It felt like abandonment with armor on. She caught his sleeve before he could turn away. "You keep putting walls between us and calling them safety." Pain flashed over his face, stark and unguarded. If Tamsin is right, my scent, my claim, even my skin could stress your bloodline and trigger. Trigger what? Lightning? Rot? Spite? She released him, shaking now with anger and something too close to hurt. "I crossed half a kingdom to survive Windrider. I did not do it to be left alone in a tower because your healer likes dramatic words." "She is not mine tonight," he said bitterly. "Neither is this law." "Then take it back." His laugh was a shredded sound. "I can break wrists and rewrite fortress statutes. I cannot feed a starving pack if the crown strips our trade. I cannot guard every road if half my allies pull men. And I cannot," he said, voice cracking on the last word, "risk being the reason you die." The corridor swallowed their silence. He left before she could answer. Later, from the gallery above the infirmary, Aurora watched Tamsin grind herbs with Windrider's apprentice at her elbow and speak loudly to anyone listening about omens, unstable wombs, and the mercy of early rites. Every phrase spread like smoke. Pressure tightened from all sides. Law, hunger, rumor, fear. By midnight, Aurora understood the shape of the trap. Make Lucian choose between mate and pack. Make either choice, ruin him. The rain finally stopped near second watch. The fortress exhaled into dripping quiet. Aurora couldn't sleep. Her door guards had traded whispers for snores, one soft, one rattling. She wrapped a cloak over her shift and slipped into the corridor barefoot, moving by memory and moonlight through unfinished arches until she found the map room. Lucian was there, as if she'd scented him true. He stood over a table littered with root stones and casualty tallies, one hand braced on the wood, the other pressing hard between his eyes. A single lamp burned low. He didn't look up when she entered. "You should be in bed," he said. "So should you." "No, because you can't," she said quietly. "Or because you won't?" That made him raise his head. In this light, he looked carved from fatigue and fury, beautiful in the way storms were beautiful when you knew they could drown you. Both. She moved to the opposite side of the table. Between them lay maps, laws, fear, an unborn child, and the memory of one moonless night neither had spoken plain. "I need truth," she said. "No guards, no counsel, just you." He gave one sharp nod. "Were you there?" she asked. "At the ruined chapel on the South Road during moonless rains." His answer came without pause. "Yes." Her breath shuddered out. "Why didn't you say anything at the gate?" "Because if I had, I would have taken you in my arms in front of 50 soldiers, and after Tamsin's warning, I didn't trust my own restraint." She swallowed. "You remember me." "I remember everything," he said, voice gone rough. "Your hands were bleeding from bramble cuts. You stole my cloak, then apologized to it. You told me your name was Rory and dared me to laugh." The corner of his mouth twitched once, pained. "You fell asleep against my chest for 20 minutes and called me safe in your dreams. No one has ever called me that." Aurora closed her eyes briefly. The memory hit warm and devastating. "When dawn came," she whispered, "you told me to run west if I wanted to live. I had scouts tracking Windrider slavers in the area. I guessed what you were." His gaze dropped to her throat, where the collar no longer sat. Something savage flickered in him. "I did not know then what you were to me. What am I to you now?" He looked at her like the question hurt. "Everything I cannot afford to lose." The words cracked something open in her chest. She pulled the medallion from beneath her shift, crescent iron, moonstone inlay, catching lamplight, and set it on the map between them. "I stole this from Windrider's accounting room, along with ledger pages naming payments to raiders hitting your caravans." His head snapped up. "You have proof?" She nodded. "Hidden where no one has searched yet." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I was busy being called a curse and locked in a tower." Shame flashed across his face. "Aurora." She held up a hand. "And because trust is not a door I open because a king kneels nicely." He absorbed that without flinching. "Fair." She pushed the medallion closer. "But I'm opening it now." Lucian picked up the crescent. The moment his skin touched it, the stone gave a faint pulse of silver light, then stilled. His brows drew together. "Ironhold royal make," he murmured. "This is old line work. Pre-war." "I don't know why it answered me," she admitted. "I only know Windrider wanted it hidden, and me silenced." He set the medallion down carefully, as if it might explode. "Then we expose her before she can force tribunal custody." A bitter laugh escaped Aurora. "How? With a healer she bought and allies already whispering?" Lucian came around the table then, slow, giving her room to step away. She didn't. He stopped inches from her, close enough that his warmth chased the chill from her skin. His hand lifted, hovered near her cheek, then curled into a fist and dropped again. "I haven't touched you," he said, each word dragged raw. "Because every night I hear Tamsin saying cursed, and every night I imagine your heart stopping under my hand. I can survive your anger. I cannot survive that." Aurora stared at him, throat thick. You think distance hurts less? No. A humorless smile. I know better. She reached first this time, taking his wrist and placing his palm, carefully, deliberately, over the flat of her lower belly through wool and linen. He froze. His eyes went wide, then closed, as if bracing for pain. None came. Only breath. Heat. A bond humming low and steady between them. See? She whispered. I'm still here. When he opened his eyes again, they were bright with unshed exhaustion and something dangerously like hope. He bent his forehead to hers, not kissing, just resting there, their breaths mingling. I don't deserve your courage, he murmured. Probably not. A hoarse laugh shook out of him, brief and real. The moment might have become something else. Soft, claiming, irreversible, if the alarm bell hadn't started screaming. Not the gate horn, not council call, fire bell. They broke apart and ran. Smoke rolled through the lower courtyard in black sheets. Someone had torched the grain stores, 3 long sheds of winter barley and dried root, now roaring like furnaces. Wolves in partial shift formed bucket lines, while sparks leapt to scaffolds and new timber. Water! Move! Captain shouted. Aurora coughed hard, eyes streaming, as Lucian vaulted a collapsed beam and hauled 2 trapped workers clear with bare hands. His cloak caught cinders. He tore it off and kept moving. Then came the second blow. A messenger tore in through the chaos, blood on his temple, clutching a sealed tube. From tribunal riders, he shouted, arrived under white flag during the fire. Of course they had. Lucian ripped the seal one-handed and scanned the page. The color drained from his face in a way flame could not explain. What? Aurora demanded. He looked up slowly. Emergency order. Moonright moved forward. His voice sounded like gravel. Tomorrow at moonrise, they're invoking plague authority. If I refuse transfer, Crown law permits allied pacts to enforce compliance by force. Around them, grain crackled and fell inward with a hiss like rain on stone. Before Aurora could answer, a second runner barreled through smoke from the west gate. Raiders hit the river convoy, she panted. Not just raiders. Stonejaw men among them. Our escort is down. They took the salt wagons. Starvation, law, sabotage. All at once. Perfect timing. Perfect pressure. Windrider stepped out of the smoke near the well, veil tied back, expression arranged into grieving concern. Not a hair out of place. How tragic, she said, loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear. First the curse, now the stores. Lucian, listen to reason before your people pay for your sentiment. Lucian bared his teeth, ash streaking his face like war paint. Get away from me! She ignored him and looked straight at Aurora. Her eyes were bright with triumph now, no pretense left. You can end this, Windrider said sweetly. Walk into tribunal custody and call it sacrifice. Refuse, and every empty bowl in this fortress becomes your doing. Several nearby wolves looked away. A few did not. Aurora felt the weight of those stares like stones laid one by one on her chest. Then Healer Tamsin appeared at Windrider's shoulder, clutching her charms, voice shrill with performative panic. She must be cleansed before quickening. The omens are escalating. Fire is first sign. Lucian moved as if to lunge. 2 captains grabbed his arms, not restraining, exactly, but warning. If he struck a noble petitioner under tribunal writ, war would start tonight. His wolf was right there, eyes molten, claws half out, sleep-starved and shaking. Windrider saw it and smiled. Critical, Aurora thought numbly. This is the edge, fire behind them, hunger ahead, law above. A king one breath from tearing the wrong throat and losing everything. Lucian turned to her then, face stripped bare. I can fight them, he said, voice ragged. I can. But people will die before dawn. Tribunal riders waited at the gate. Moonrise was less than a day away. And in the smoke-thick courtyard, with ash falling like black snow, Aurora understood that if she did nothing, Windrider would take her child, Lucian's throne, and every choice she had ever clawed back from a life in chains. Aurora stepped forward into the ashfall before Lucian could answer for her. "Enough," she said, and the word came out sharper than the fire bell. She turned, not to Windrider, but to the tribunal riders by the gate, 6 wolves in crown-gray cloaks, hands on the hilts of ceremonial blades that could still kill. "Who carries the writ?" Their captain, a scarred she-wolf with iron rings in both ears, lifted the tube. "Captain Ilara Voss, by plague authority, I am ordered to transfer you to Moon Tribunal custody." Lucian snarled. "You'll go through me." Ilara's jaw tightened. "With respect, Your Grace, if I fail this order, the Crown names your territory in rebellion by dawn." Around them, grain sheds caved inward with a roar. Sparks spiraled into the night. Hungry wolves watched from bucket lines, faces black with soot, eyes hollow with fear. Windrider spread her hands, benevolent as wrought. "See? No one wants blood. Come peacefully, little ghost. Save them all." Aurora looked at her and saw it clearly now. Not rage, not jealousy, but arithmetic. Starve a pack, bribe a healer, forge a lineage, call murder mercy. Balance achieved. She touched the medallion beneath her shift, felt the cold half-moon edge bite her skin, and made her choice. "In the sight of fire and witnesses," she said, raising her voice until even the wolves on the far scaffolds turned, "I reject purification under false claim. I invoke blood right trial under the old Ironhold statutes, blood to Moonstone, truth under oath magic, judgment before cleansing." Silence fell so hard she could hear timber pop in the flames. Captain Ilara blinked. "That law is dead." "It is dormant," came a dry voice from the smoke. Old Bram Halofin limped in from the well, wolfsbane beads clicking in his beard. Nessa Thornclaw stood beside him, rain-dark cloak plastered to her shoulders. Even Stonejaw had come, arm in a sling from the convoy fight. "Dormant is not dead," Bram said. "If she knows the words and bears the token, Tribunal must hear it." Windrider's composure cracked, just for a heartbeat. "A servant cannot invoke blood right." Aurora met her stare. "Then you should have killed me better." Lucian moved to Aurora's side, ash in his hair, eyes burning silver. He did not touch her. He did not speak for her. He stood like a wall and let her voice lead. Captain Ilara exhaled once, hard. "By law, invocation stays cleansing until judgment." She looked to Windrider. "My lady, your petition is suspended pending trial." "You incompetent?" Windrider snapped, then smoothed her expression into silk. "Very well. Let the poor thing embarrass herself publicly." Tamsin pushed forward, clutching her charms. "This is dangerous delay. The omen—" Aurora cut her off. "You'll testify, healer." Tamsin's pupils widened. Ilara signaled her riders. "Form escort. We leave now. Tribunal convenes by moonrise." As they moved, one frightened young wolf from the bucket line blurted, "If she fails, we still lose food." Aurora turned to him, smoke stinging her eyes. "If I fail," she said, "I walk into their right myself. No one dies for my choice, but if I win, no one calls your hunger fate while nobles pay raiders to make it worse." Murmurs rippled, uncertain, then fierce. Windrider's smile thinned. Aurora climbed into the tribunal carriage under armed watch. Lucian mounted beside it, soaked and sleepless and still terrifying, and when the wheels jolted into the night, she understood she was riding toward either a throne or an execution. And for the first time in her life, the choice had been hers. Moon Tribunal Hall was carved from white granite and old law. By the time they arrived, the galleries were already full. Pack envoys, court scribes, priests with inked wrists, guards in crown gray, and enough whispering mouths to turn rumor into verdict before anyone bled. At the center stood the moonstone dais, pale and veined like frozen light. Windrider entered in silver silk and widow blue, grief painted delicately across her face. She took her place with practiced serenity beside the royal adjudicators. Aurora stood alone until Lucian took position one pace behind her left shoulder, not claimant, not king, not savior. Witness. The chief adjudicator struck his staff once. Petition of House Windrider for cleansing rite. Counter invocation of blood rite by subject Aurora. Surname disputed. Proceed. Windrider's scribe unfurled forged genealogy, voice ringing. No lawful Ironhold issue survived the war purge. Subject is lowborn servant, undocumented, apprehended with stolen materials. Healer testimony confirms curse line gestation endangering pack stability. Tamsin stepped forward, avoiding Aurora's eyes. The adjudicator turned. Do you withdraw invocation, subject? Aurora untied her cloak. Beneath, she wore plain dark wool, throat bare where the collar had been. No. She walked to the center of the dais. Every footstep echoed. Token, the adjudicator demanded. Aurora drew out the crescent medallion. Gasps flickered through the hall as Moonstone caught moonlight and flashed. Blood offering required, said the adjudicator. Aurora looked once at Lucian. His face was carved stone, but his hand had curled so tight his knuckles were white. She pressed the medallion's sharp inner edge into her palm and dragged. Pain flared bright and clean. Blood welled, then fell. 1 drop, 2, 3, onto the moonstone. For one suspended heartbeat, nothing happened. Windrider smiled. Then the dais ignited. Silver fire raced through the moonstone veins in branching arcs. Ancient sigils erupted from the floor and climbed Aurora's calves like light water, circling her in the Ironhold crest, crescent over fang, broken chain beneath. Above her head, a dormant glyph on the tribunal arch blazed awake for the first time in a generation. The hall exploded in shouts. Impossible! Ironhold line! Moon witness! Aurora's knees nearly buckled. The medallion burned hot in her fist, not harming, just claiming. She lifted her bleeding hand so all could see. Name me servant again, she said hoarsely, and call your ancestors liars while you do it. Windrider's face had gone bone pale under powder. The adjudicator slammed his staff for silence. Blood right accepted. Claimant Aurora Ironhold recognized provisional heir pending witness examination. Aurora turned, blood dripping to stone. I call healer Tamsin. Tamsin flinched. I have already testified. Under house influence, Aurora said. Now under oath magic. The adjudicator nodded grimly. Bring the basin. A priest set a shallow bowl of infused water at Tamsin's feet. Wolfsbane smoke curled green from the surface. Oath magic did not care for rank. It cared for truth, and punished lies with immediate burn. Tamsin trembled. Windrider hissed, Compose yourself. Aurora stepped close enough to see sweat bead at the healer's hairline. Did you diagnose my pregnancy as cursed by broken blood because it was true? She asked, voice steady. Or because you were paid to say it? Tamsin swallowed. I... The wolfbane in the bowl hissed louder. Answer. The adjudicator barked. Tamsin squeezed her eyes shut. Paid. A collective snarl moved through the crowd. Windrider surged to her feet. She is confused. This is coercion. Aurora didn't look at her. By whom, healer? Tamsin whimpered. House Windrider. The bowl flashed. Green sparks licked Tamsin's wrists where the oath bound her. She cried out, collapsing to her knees. Aurora reached into her cloak seam, ripped stitches with her blood-slick fingers, and pulled free folded ledger pages stained with old soot. Then let us continue with records. She handed them to the adjudicator. The pages passed from hand to hand under tribunal lanterns. Each line was read aloud. Payments to border raiders, dates matching convoy ambushes, coded routes, wolf sign marks in margins. Not just Windrider's seal, but contracted symbols tied to Stonejaw's quartermasters and 2 crown clerks now sweating in the gallery. Stonejaw swore and lunged for the rail. Forgery! The adjudicator held up a palm. Silence until verified. A scribe carried the pages to the moon-lens brazier. Truthfire licked the ink. False lines would blacken. Instead, signatures blazed silver, one by one, bright enough to hurt. Windrider bolted. She spun for the side doors, skirts gathered, face twisted with naked hate. But Lucian was already moving. He hit the doors first, bracing both hands against ironwood as they slammed shut behind him with a thunderous boom. "No," he said. Windrider wheeled, breath ragged. "Move. You don't understand what she is." "I understand exactly what she is." Lucian's voice was deadly quiet. "Mine to protect, yours to answer." Aurora walked down from the dais, blood still drying on her palm, and stopped 3 feet from her cousin. "Face me, cousin." Windrider laughed, high and breaking. "Cousin? Don't dress filth in family words. You were bred to scrub floors, not sit a throne." Aurora held her gaze. "I survived your floors. Now watch me inherit what you tried to bury." Tamsin crawled forward on shaking hands, sobbing. She said if the mate bond held, Lucian would never take Windrider. She said an omen would isolate you. She said tribunal right would solve everything before quickening. Gods forgive me, I only wanted my son's debt cleared." Windrider screamed, "Coward!" The adjudicator's staff cracked down. "Enough. House Windrider, you are charged with treason by famine conspiracy, falsified tribunal petition, and attempted unlawful killing under guise of cleansing rite. How do you answer?" Windrider's mouth curled. Pride flared one last time. "I answer that kingdoms are not built on sentiment. He needed a queen fit for rule, not a branded stray with a bastard swelling." Lucian took 1 step forward, wolf in his eyes. Aurora touched his forearm lightly. He stopped. She addressed the adjudicator. "My answer is law. Strip her." The decree came swift as falling steel. "By Moon Tribunal authority," the adjudicator intoned, "Aurora Windrider is stripped of title, lands, and court protection. Sentence: exile beyond pack borders and iron manacles, lifetime ban on return. Healer Tamsin is stripped of office and remanded to labor ward pending restitution under oath bond." Guards seized Windrider. She thrashed, spit flying, silk tearing as iron cuffs snapped around her wrists. "You think this makes you queen?" she snarled at Aurora as they dragged her backward. "You are still what I made you." Aurora's voice carried clear to the rafters. "No, I'm what survived you." The gallery erupted. Howls, pounding fists, voices rising first uncertain, then unified. "Ironhold! Lucian! Aurora!" Windrider was hauled out across the tribunal floor, iron manacles biting, her protest swallowed by the sound of a pack choosing new law. Lucian turned to Aurora in the roaring hall, eyes bright with 9 nights of terror finally cracking apart. He didn't touch her. Not yet. Night settled soft and dark over the sacred cedar circle above the fortress, where old roots knuckled through stone and moonlight silvered every needle. No guards, no court. No law, but breath and choice. Lucian stood at the edge of the ring, cloak discarded, shirt unlaced at the throat, as if armor of rank had no place here. He looked wrecked, smoke-scented, scarred, sleepless, shaking now that he had stopped pretending not to. Aurora stepped into the circle opposite him, her tribunal braid half fallen, blood-right bandage clean on her palm. For a long moment neither spoke. Their bond hummed between them, warm and insistent, no longer jagged with fear. Lucian swallowed hard. I brought you here because I won't let victory, law, or instinct make this decision for you. His voice roughened. No orders, only choice. Do you still choose me? Aurora felt the night air on her throat where a collar used to sit. She thought of iron rods, locked doors, burning grain, moonstone fire. She thought of him kneeling with a washcloth and reading outside her door instead of crossing it. She stepped closer until their breath mingled. Yes, she whispered, I choose you. His eyes closed briefly, like prayer answered. She reached up and pulled her hair over one shoulder, baring the junction of neck and shoulder to moonlight. Offering, invitation. Claim asked and granted. Then mark me, she said. A tremor ran through him. Aurora, once I bite the bond seals, you'll feel everything I feel. I already do, she said. Do it. He cupped her jaw with both hands, reverent, thumbs stroking once as if memorizing permission. Mine, he breathed, question and vow. Yours, she answered and rose onto her toes. His canines pierced clean at her shoulder. Pain flashed hot, sharp, bright enough to arch her spine, and then changed. Heat flooded out from the bite in pulsing waves, turning ache into something fierce and intoxicating. The world narrowed to cedar scent, his mouth on her skin, his growl rumbling through her bones as wolf and woman aligned at once. The bond snapped fully into place. It was not a chain. It was a rush. Stormlight through open doors, 9 sleepless nights shattering, his fear pouring into her and dissolving against her certainty. She felt his first sight of her at the gate like it was her own memory, his restraint like a wound, his love like a blade turned outward against the world. Under it all, steady and bright, the tiny flicker of their unborn child, curious and unafraid. Aurora gasped, fingers digging into his shoulders. Lucian! He eased back at once, tongue soothing the mark, eyes wild and wet and adoring. Silver and gold swirled together in his irises. Too much? He asked, panicked. Tell me. She laughed, breathless. Perfect. Then she slid her hand to his jaw and turned him, pressing her mouth to the thick muscle where neck met shoulder. Your turn. His wolf rumbled approval, low and needy. Take what's yours, mate. She bit. His body jolted under her hands, a groan torn from deep in his chest. The taste of him, salt, heat, pine, and iron, flooded her senses. She sank just enough to mark, not maim, and when she released, his pulse hammered against her lips. Mine, she murmured against the new crescent on his shoulder. Yours, he answered instantly, voice wrecked. The second seal surged through them like matching thunder. She felt his relief become sleep-heavy peace for the first time in days. He felt her old terror of hands and cages crack and fall away, replaced by a fierce territorial joy that startled a laugh out of her. Their wolves brushed and twined in the bond space, not dominance and submission, but parallel strength. Mate, they whispered together, foreheads touching. He gathered her then, carefully at first, then with shaking urgency, arms around her waist, cheek pressed to her marked shoulder as if to reassure himself she was real. She slid her arms under his and held him just as hard, feeling his breathing slow against her chest. 9 nights, he said into her skin, voice muffled. I thought if I slept you'd vanish. I'm here, she whispered, threading fingers through his hair. Sleep now, Alpha King. He huffed a weak laugh. Bossy queen. Get used to it. They stood in the cedar circle until moonset, marks cooling to a deep shared thrum. No curse, no distance, just the settled certainty of 2 hearts finally beating in one rhythm without fear of what it would cost. At dawn, the great hall filled again, this time with witnesses instead of accusers. Aurora stood beside Lucian on the rebuilt dais, while the chief adjudicator read the formal recognition. By blood right proven and tribunal decree, he declared, Aurora Ironhold is acknowledged royal-born Luna Queen and co-ruler of Silvermane territory. Her child is entered in the record as moon-marked heir of lawful line. A woman in green healer's cords stepped forward, hand over heart. Midwife Sarah Vale, truth sworn by moon oath, she said, I have examined the queen. No curse markers. Strong pulse, stable growth. Lucian exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for a lifetime. In the front rows, Nessa Thornclaw and Bram Halifin knelt and renewed trade oaths aloud. Stonejaw knelt last, face thunderous, and accepted tribunal fines and convoy oversight for his quartermaster's collusion. He did not look at Aurora when he swore. Tamsin, stripped of bone charms, passed under guard toward labor detail, eyes down. She stopped once at the hall doors, turned to Aurora, and rasped, I was wrong. Then she was gone. By midday, Aurora took her own seat at the war table and signed her first decree with a steady hand. Servant branding and collaring are abolished in all allied lands under Silvermane Compact. Any house refusing compliance forfeits trade passage and military protection. Mara, smuggled out from House Windrider with a line of kitchen girls and stable boys, stood in the hall when the decree was posted. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth and started to cry. Bran arrived with them in chains he had locked on himself, so no one could claim he fled justice. He knelt before Aurora, head bowed. I locked your laundry door, he said hoarsely. I left the bolt loose. It doesn't balance. No, Aurora said. It doesn't. She let the silence sit, then nodded to the guard. Take off his chains. He serves sanctuary labor for 1 year. After that, he chooses where he lives. Bran's shoulders broke on an exhale. Thank you, my queen. That night, for the first time in 9 days, Lucian slept. Not in armor, not in a chair by a war map. In their chamber, on his side, one broad hand spread over the gentle curve of Aurora's belly, mating mark dark against his throat where she could see it in the firelight. His breathing dropped deep and even. No flinches, no growls, no startled waking. Aurora lay awake a while just to watch it, wonder soft and fierce in her chest. Then she kissed his brow, tucked his hand closer, and slept too. At first light they climbed the rebuilt western wall together. Below, the fortress yard thrummed with work. Masons setting stone, wagons unloading grain under armed escort, sanctuary banners rising over the old barracks where escaped bondsfolk now registered names instead of losing them. Children chased each other between lumber stacks. No one shushed them. Lucian came up behind Aurora, warm and solid, and rested his chin on her shoulder. Carefully, always careful, now by love, not fear. She covered his hand with hers. Pack voices rose from the yard when they saw them, howls rolling up the wall, not for conquest, but for belonging. For survival chosen, not endured. Marked at neck and shoulder, blood right and bond both blazing quiet under skin, Aurora and Lucian looked out over stone, smoke, and mourning, unbroken, unafraid, and finally, together.